bring it to our family here on Martin Luther King Monday, Breakfast Monday, the Reverend Pastor Mark Miller, childhood friend of Minister Lenny Muhammad.
Greetings, everybody. Yes. Greetings. Honor to the Master of the Lodge, to the distinguished officers, ministers, clergy, my good friends. I grew up with these guys. This guy was a DJ friend of mine, and this guy over here, we used to break dance, but we're not talking about that. We're not talking about any of that. We're here to talk about Dr. Martin Luther King. You can still do it? I can still do it. Dr. Martin Luther King, I'm here to try to do my best as we commemorate him, was a man that was insightful, impactful, and revolutionary. He's a true agent of social change. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of things we should already know, and then I'll move to my main point. Dr. King was born Michael Luther King, but later his father changed both his and his son's name to Martin, after the Christian reformer Martin Luther. He attended segregated public schools in Georgia, graduating from high school at the age of 15. He received a BA degree in sociology in 1948 from Morehouse College, having skipped both grade 9 and 11. A distinguished institution that he attended of Morehouse was both where his father and grandfather graduated. After 3 years of theological study at Crozer Theological Seminary in Pennsylvania, he was elected president of a predominantly white senior class. He was awarded his Bachelor of Divinity in 1951. With a fellowship won at Crozer, he enrolled in graduate studies at Boston University, completing his residence for a doctorate in 1953 and receiving a degree in 1955. In Boston, he met his wife, Coretta, a young woman who had been there with him along the way. In 1954, Martin Luther King became the pastor of the Dexter Avenue Baptist Church in Montgomery, Alabama. Always a worker for civil rights and for members of his ethnic class, his race. King was by this time a member of the executive committee of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. He was moving, he was doing things, he was ready then early in December in 1955 to accept the leadership of the first Negro nonviolent demonstration of contemporary times in the United States, what we know as the bus boycott in Alabama, lasting 382 days. After the Supreme Court of the United States had declared it unconstitutional, the laws requiring segregation on buses, Negroes as they were termed at the time, and whites rode the buses as equals. During these days of boycott, King was arrested, his home was bombed, he was subjected to personal abuse, but at the same time, he emerged as the leader in first rank. In 1957, he was elected president of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, an organization formed to provide new leadership for the now burgeoning, in his day, civil rights movement. The ideals for his organization he took from Christianity. He was a Christian. Jesus was his motto, but the operational fortitude of how it was meted out come from Gandhi, who exemplified the power of nonviolence by demonstrating against Britain and his native land of India. In the 11-year period between 1957 and 1968, King traveled over 6 million miles, spoke over 2,500 times, appearing wherever there was an injustice, protest, and action. And meanwhile, he wrote 5 books, as well as numerous articles. And in these years, he had a massive protest in Birmingham, Alabama. We know about him from what he had done in 1963, where they spoke for jobs and freedom, and he spoke about having a dream. He was the youngest man at the time to win the Nobel Peace Prize. At the age of 35, Martin Luther King was the youngest man to receive such an award. But on the evening of April 4th, 1968, while standing on the balcony of the motel room in Memphis, Tennessee, where he was to lead the protest march in sympathy with striking sanitation workers in the city, he was assassinated. So I want to speak to you now about values lost and still undiscovered. The root of Dr. King teaches us something about where he started. He focused on injustices, those that he saw in his own life and those that were felt by the people within his community. He addressed the articles of availability versus attainability, or obtainability versus attainability. See, to obtain means to get or to acquire, but to obtain means it has to be first be made available. To attain means to achieve or accomplish. There's sometimes a seeming common ground between these verbs, especially when somebody obtains something that is related to something else. If I go to the supermarket to purchase an item and find that it's out of stock, it is not allowed for me to be purchase it because it's not obtainable. But if it is on the shelf and I'm not allowed to buy it, then that means I can't attain it. But that means something is holding me back from these things. These two challenges, when applied to human rights, seem similar but are not the same. Dr. King understood that when the right to be treated as an equal in his own country was not available, it was due to an unobtainable fact, because it was not available by those who made laws. He understood that it was not attainable or achievable because the right to even change those laws was also not available. African Americans were not allowed to vote. And if you couldn't vote, you couldn't bring the people in that could make change. Dr. King's ideology was pregnant in his mind even while he was a sophomore at Morehouse. In 1946, he writes an article called Kick Up Dust to the Atlanta Constitution. He says, "We want and are entitled to the basic rights and opportunities of American citizens, the right to earn a living, at work for which we're fitted and trained with the ability, the equal opportunity to education, health, recreation, and public services, and the right to vote, equality before the law, some of the same courtesy and good manners that we ourselves bring to all human relations." And we find that Martin Luther King was forced with the challenge of race relations. Race relations was the issue. King knew that change had to take place in a way that people relate. It's called race relations because we are in a relationship. I don't know about you. Sometimes you may be in a good relationship, or you may be in a bad relationship. Some bad relationships you just can't get out of. But you're in a relationship yet the same. He knew that real change had to take place, but it could not be done without relationship. He formulated these concepts in 1957 when he stated in an article called Nonviolence and Racial Justice. He spoke about the crisis of race relations that dominated the arena of American life. He addressed the challenges of African Americans to be treated with respect and have the ability to exercise the rights of any other American. Africans were brought here in 1619 against their own will. They were brought here as property, as an economic tool to make money for the establishment. The Dred Scott decision of 1857 illustrates the status of slavery. And then we find that after the emancipation in 1863, the Negro was still confronted with oppression and inequality. And Dr. King spoke on these terms. In 1896, they dealt with the problem of separate but not equal, focusing more on separate and little on equal. Dr. King addressed this imbalance by coming up with something unique. We know that the problem is when we're victims, we act like victims, we treat ourselves like victims, and we become unable to move as victims. He addressed the imbalance in this victimized state by bringing in a new concept he saw in a leader named Mohandas Gandhi. In 1957, he wrote in an article, continuing in this article, about the alternative to violence. The alternative to violence is nonviolent resistance. It goes against logic. The method was made to create something of a movement. There were 6 points, but I'm going to speak about 5. The first of was, he says, this method that I'm using of nonviolence, it's not that it's not resisting the situation, it is resisting the resistor, but at the same time, it's passive physically, but it's active spiritually. Non-aggressive physically, but dynamically aggressive spiritually. Holding firm to not seek to defeat or humiliate our opponent.
Go ahead.
That's a hard one.
Go ahead.
When somebody does you wrong, the first thing you want to do is rub their face in all that mess that they got you in.
Go ahead, right.
He wanted us to see something different, that if we make ourselves aware that they are merely a means to awaken the sense of moral shame in our opponent. The end is redemption, and what we really seek is not to overcome and retaliate, but what we really seek is reconciliation. He learned this as God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, not to retaliate against man's disobedience, but to reconcile man back to God.
Come on.
The aftermath of nonviolence is the creation of something unique, a beloved community, while the aftermath of violence is nothing but tragic bitterness. The characteristic of this method, the third point that I want us to understand, is that the attack is directed against the forces of evil rather than against the persons who are caught up in those forces. It is evil we're seeking to defeat, not persons victimized by evil.
Go ahead.
Those of us who struggle against racial injustice must come to see that the basic tension is not just about race. This is Dr. King. As I like to say to the people of Montgomery, Alabama, he said, the tension in the city is not between white people and Negro people. The tension is a bottom line between justice and injustice, between the forces of light and the forces of darkness. The fourth point I want us to understand is that it must be brought out concerning nonviolent resistance, that it avoids not only physical violence, but it teaches us something else. It teaches us that it accepts the suffering without retaliation, because unearned suffering is redemptive and is a tremendous educational and transforming possibility. The fifth point is that nonviolence chooses love instead of hate.
All right. All right.
I'm so challenged. I've been through a lot. I grew up with these brothers. They know me personally. I'm biracial. My father's black, my mother's white. I grew up in the early 70s. And I dealt with fighting not only whites, but also fighting blacks. Oh, you think you're too good. Or you think you got good hair. Or you think you're better than I am because you like. Then I got to deal with the white boys who call me that famous N-word. So I understand it from a perspective that is different.
Come on.
Nonviolence believes that God is a God of justice, and we're in the Masonic Hall right now. And with these steps, we have wisdom and strength and beauty. With wisdom, we curtail the strength. And the addition of strength and wisdom can only equal beauty, not knowable without the merger of the two. So where we are and what we're doing, we must look at the now. After Dr. King, significant changes have taken place. One of the most significant events that have taken place in this history of our country is the day when a young senator named Barack Obama was voted into office of the President of the United States. He was voted in 2008 and a second term in 2012. We see in our current history what Martin Luther King would have never expected. Whether you agree or whether you disagree with the politics of the president is not the point. The impact is that African Americans now have one of their own sitting at the Oval Office of a country that built it on the backs of their slavery. A country that was built on a trade of human chattel. But we've come to terms to this. We're no longer wowed by this. We as African Americans are in many areas of politics, business, science, medicine. But all that we've achieved are part of the after effects of Dr. King and a Malcolm X. So what about current events do we see? There are current events that we see in the year 2015 that make me shake my head and wonder. With 2014 tragedies of Trayvon Martin, Eric Garner, and Michael Brown. These events are seemingly, if not actually, racially charged and should bring us to a place of pause and self-reflection. What has happened to us? The debate rings in the ears of all who will listen. Were these events actually racially charged, or were they just racially labeled? I leave that up to you to decide. I'm not here to decide that. There were many demonstrations by the Reverend Al Sharpton to address the race issue, which were not fully supported by the African American community. Why are we not all on the same page? This is because the community we live in today is not synonymous with the community of Dr. King's time. I want you to hear me. These issues and challenges that Dr. King faced affected all African Americans at all times in all places. All African Americans were denied the right that King stood for. The issues we face today are more complex and they're multifaceted. The issues today are deeper and are manifested in ways that extend well beyond race. Americans must be careful not to polarize in segments driven by the media that fuels the hype of the race issue. I argue the issue now was, as in Dr. King's time, it has more to do with man's view of himself and man's view of his creator than it has to do with the particulars of race or ethnicity. I want you to work with me now. We as a nation are facing issues that are beyond comprehension. For a time in man's history where man has created what is often called the World Wide Web, it's replete with information. We have not only information, but we have access to it.
Right.
This access has never existed in the capacity that it does now. Media and TVs are everywhere. Handheld smartphones that would seem to be space age to a Dr. Martin Luther King. Social media, as they call it. The internet's rate of growth is phenomenal. While it's productive on one end, it's dangerous on the other.
That's right.
Information is no longer given in stages, but it can be accessed by those not mature enough to assimilate it in its proper context.
Go ahead now. Go ahead.
Now I'm going where I want to go. Our current events have given us also more societal challenges. We have Columbine, the shootings of Virginia Tech,
That's right.
Sandy Hook. School shootings have occurred since the 1700s. They're not new. But should we not have been living in a dream that Dr. King mentioned in 1963? We see violence existing in institutions, which are supposed to be places of solace. Educational institutions are supposed to be safe havens that elevates its students beyond the primitive and barbaric to better avenues and streets where solutions for mankind are nurtured and developed. Listen what Dr. King says, and I'm trying to get out your way. Dr. King said in 1968, this is in 1968, remaining awake through a great revolution, he says, through our scientific and technological genius, we've made of this world a neighborhood, and yet we have not had the ethical commitment to make it a brotherhood. But somehow, in some way, we've got to do this. This is Dr. King. We must all learn to live together as brothers, or we will all perish together as fools.
Come on.
We are tied together in the single garment of destiny, caught in an inescapable network of mutuality. And whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, here we go, I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And I can never be what you ought to be. You can't be until I am what I ought to be. And this is the way God has made the universe.
Speak about it.
Come on. Come on.
Our neighborhood is vast. We got Facebook friends and Twitter followers.
Yes, sir.
But our brotherhood is devolving. When we should be evolving, we have devolved.
Yes, sir.
People sit in rooms
Come on.
and text each other while they sit across the table. Are you for real?
Come on. Come on.
They don't even have a conversation. If I take that phone away, they would look around like, I don't even know what to say to you. Human contact has denigrated.
Come on.
We've diminished humans to a digital footprint.
Speak about
We've
it.
forgotten the carbon footprint. In 1954, now I'm getting to the close. I want to take you to where Dr. King started. He had a sermon called Rediscovering Lost Values. We begin to wonder if it's that we don't know enough. But if it can't be that, because in terms of knowledge, as I've just discussed, We know more today than man has in any human period of history. We have facts at our disposal. We know more about math and science, social science, philosophy. We know more about everything. So it's not that we don't know enough. What's the problem? King quotes in Remaining Awake in A Great Revolution. He says, John Donne caught it years ago and placed it in graphic terms. No man is an island entire to himself, and every man is a piece of the continent and a part of the main. And he goes on toward the end and he says, any man's death diminishes me because I'm involved in mankind. Therefore, never send to know for whom the bell tolls. It tolls for you. We must see this. We must believe this. We must live this. So where do we go? Where do we go? I want this quote to resonate in your hearts when we leave here today. Martin Luther King Jr. said, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. So our situation, as Dr. King said in his sermon, Rediscovering Lost Values, reminds me in the 2nd chapter of Luke that Jesus' family was on their way back to Nazareth. And I imagine that they walked for a little while and they didn't look back to see if everybody was there. But the scripture says they went about a day's journey and then stopped. And I imagine they just wanted to check up and make sure everything was all right, to see if all things were in order. And they realized they were missing something precious. They discovered that Jesus was not with them. They had sense enough to know that before they could go forward to Nazareth, they had to go, backward to Jerusalem to rediscover this wonderful value. And may it be that what he said in 1954 is true in 2015. We need to go back in order to go forward. What do we need to go back to? We need to first discover this main value. We must discover this, that all reality hinges on moral foundations. In other words, this is a moral universe, and that there are moral laws of the universe, just as abiding as the physical universe. Jesus says, love your neighbor as you love yourself. He said, take all the commandments and hang them on too. Love God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul, and love your neighbor as yourself. And then there's the second principle. We got to go back and rediscover this, that there's a God behind the process. We live in a world that is militant in its atheism. But what's more dangerous than this militant atheism is somewhat of a practical atheism, the most dangerous type, where we talk about God with our mouths and our lip service, but he's nowhere to be found in our life service.
All right.
And there's always danger. And it will make it appear externally that we believe in God when internally we do not.
Come on.
And I'm going to put it to the ultimate faith that the gods of materialism and popularity, that the gods of making it in the corporate world are destroying us from keeping to what Dr. King wants us to see from the beginning. Values have been lost and must be rediscovered. That man must value his creator.
Yes, Lord.
Man must value each other.
Yes.
Man must learn to seek not to retaliate, but to reconcile. And if we go forward, we've got to go back to find that value. And that is the God that demands and commands our ultimate allegiance. When we do that, Dr. King, as Brother Lenny Muhammad said, he won't be in the bubble wrap. He'll be always in the ever presence of your consciousness.
All right. All right. All right.